There is a person in your life, maybe at work, maybe at home, maybe someone you encounter online, who has figured out the exact combination of words that can completely derail your day. They don't need a weapon. They don't need authority over you. They just need to open their mouth. And something happens inside you that you cannot fully explain and cannot fully control. A surge of heat, a tightening in the chest, a flood of thoughts that hijacks everything else you were supposed to be thinking about. And the most maddening part? Hours later, sometimes days later, you are still in it, still replaying what they said, still composing responses in your head, still carrying the weight of words that took 3 seconds to deliver, and that the person who said them has almost certainly forgotten entirely. Meanwhile, they moved on. You didn't. That asymmetry between how little it cost them and how much it is costing you is not a sign of sensitivity. It is a sign of an unguarded gate, a mind that has not yet been taught to decide what gets in and what doesn't, a nervous system that is still running someone else's software. Today that changes, because what I am about to walk you through are 10 battle-tested, psychologically grounded, philosophically forged ways to master your emotions when someone insults you. Not to suppress what you feel, not to pretend you're above it, but to build the kind of interior architecture that means the next time someone reaches for your composure, they come back empty-handed. This is emotional mastery. And it is not a personality trait. It is a skill. Let's build it. Way 1. See the insult for what it actually is. Before you can master your emotions in response to an insult, you need to understand what an insult actually is at its source. Because most people get this wrong. And that single misunderstanding is responsible for most of the suffering that follows. Here is the truth. An insult is a window into the psychology of the person delivering it, not a mirror reflecting your worth. When someone goes out of their way to belittle you, dismiss you, humiliate you, or undermine your confidence, they are not responding to you with clarity and objectivity. They are responding from inside their own psychological storm. Their frustrations, their insecurities, their unresolved wounds that have never been properly addressed, and so have nowhere to go but outward. The specific words they choose, the particular angles they attack, the timing they select, all of it is a map of their interior, not yours. Think about this carefully. When you are genuinely at peace, when your confidence is solid, your relationships are healthy, your sense of purpose is clear, do you feel the impulse to tear people down? Do you invest energy in crafting dismissals, engineering humiliations, or publicly undermining the people around you? No, because people who are full do not need to drain others. The person who just insulted you is not full. They are running on empty in some critical interior dimension: significance, control, self-worth, security, and they are attempting to refill by taking from you. That is not power. That is desperation wearing the costume of power. Epictetus, who understood the full spectrum of human cruelty from the inside of it, wrote that those who insult others are enslaved, not free. Enslaved to the passions they cannot govern, compelled by forces inside them they do not control. You cannot be genuinely threatened by the behavior of someone who is not in command of themselves. The moment this lands, not as a comforting idea, but as an accurate description of what is actually happening, the insult loses its authority. It is no longer a verdict delivered from a position of power. It is a symptom displayed by a person in pain. Receive it accordingly, with clarity, without personal injury, and with the quiet understanding that what was aimed at you never actually left the person who threw it. Way 2. Withdraw the power you've been lending to words. Here's a question that sounds philosophical but is intensely practical. What exactly is a word? Strip away everything cultural, everything emotional, everything conditioned, and a word is air in motion. Pressure waves traveling from a source to a receiver. At the physical level, that is genuinely all it is. The sting, the shame, the anger, the hours of aftermath. None of that traveled in the sound wave. All of it was manufactured on arrival. By you. Through the process of interpretation that you perform so automatically, it feels like the meaning was built into the words themselves. It was not. This is the insight that sits at the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy, at the center of Stoic philosophy, and at the foundation of every serious tradition of emotional mastery the world has ever produced. Events do not cause emotional responses. Interpretations of events do, and interpretations are not fixed. They are chosen, unconsciously in the default state, consciously in the trained one. When someone calls you incompetent, that word arrives as a sound. Your brain immediately runs it through a processing system built from your history, your past experiences with criticism, your beliefs about your own capability, your sense of what this person's opinion is worth, your current emotional state, your level of sleep and stress. All of that processing happens in milliseconds and produces what feels like an inevitable emotional response. But it is not inevitable. It is constructed, and construction can be interrupted. The practice this way demands is deceptively simple. Before you process the emotional content of an insult, acknowledge the raw physical event. Someone produced sounds. Those sounds reached your ears. That is what happened. Everything after that, the meaning, the injury, the significance, is being added by you. Once you see the addition as yours, you can begin to make it deliberately. You can ask, does this deserve the weight I am about to give it? Does this person have the standing to define my worth? Is there any version of this that is actually useful information I should consider? And for the rest, the noise, the projection, the pain that was never about you, you can simply withdraw the interpretive power you are about to lend it. Words are weightless until you weigh them. Choose your scales carefully. Weigh 3. Remove the emotional label. Find the bare fact. Your brain is an interpretation engine. It does not experience events. It experiences interpretations of events, delivered so seamlessly and so instantly that the interpretation and the event feel like one thing. They are not. And separating them is one of the most powerful emotional management skills available to any human being. Here is how it works in the context of an insult. Someone speaks dismissively to you in front of others. Your brain immediately produces a label. I am being disrespected. I am being attacked. I am being made to look small. That label, and notice how personal, how emotionally loaded it already is, generates a full emotional response. Defensiveness, anger, humiliation, which generates behavioral impulses. Retaliate, withdraw, shut down. But what actually happened? Before the label, before the interpretation, what was the bare event? A person spoke. Their tone was sharp. They cut you off before you finished your point. That is what happened in the external world. Nothing in that description requires the emotional response you were about to have. That response was generated by the label, and the label was applied by you. This is the practice of objective observation that cognitive behavioral therapists call cognitive diffusion, creating distance between yourself and the story your mind is telling about the event. Not by pretending the event didn't happen, but by examining the difference between the event and the story, and deciding how much of the story is accurate and how much is automatic. From the bare fact, they spoke sharply and cut me off. You have multiple interpretive options. They were under pressure, and it came out sideways. There is a pattern of behavior here that may need to be addressed. This is a person who regularly behaves this way, and it has nothing to do with me specifically. Or yes, this is a genuine disrespect that requires a clear, calm response. All of those options are available from the bare fact. From inside the emotional label, only one option is available: react. Strip the label, find the fact, and from the fact, choose. Way 4. Run every insult through the insignificance filter. Before any insult earns a permanent place in your emotional life, make it pass one test. A single question with 2 versions, applied in sequence. First version: will this matter in 5 years? Second version: for the things that survive the first. Will this matter in 5 hours? This is not minimizing your experience. It is calibrating it. It is the cognitive practice of placing a present discomfort into its accurate temporal context and discovering, with almost universal reliability, that the thing currently occupying the front of your consciousness will occupy none of it in the span of time that actually defines your life. Seneca wrote with characteristic precision about this human tendency to experience temporary discomforts as permanent conditions. We receive an insult, and our nervous system responds as though something fundamental has been permanently altered, as though the verdict delivered in those words is now a fixed feature of our reality. But no verdict delivered in the heat of one person's bad day, bad character, or bad mood is a permanent feature of anything. The 5-year filter is not just philosophical. It is neurological. Research on the peak-end rule, the psychological principle that we evaluate experiences primarily by how they felt at their most intense moment and at their end, confirms that most of what feels enormously significant in the moment fades to near zero significance within hours. The insults you remember from 5 years ago are vanishingly few compared to the ones you have received. Most of them dissolved because you stopped feeding them attention. Deliberately apply the filter. Ask the question before you invest the attention, and release, without guilt, without ceremony, everything that doesn't survive the test. Because your attention is not infinite. It is the most valuable resource you have. And spending it on what will not matter by the time you go to sleep tonight is a transaction you cannot afford to keep making. Way 5. Understand what silence actually communicates. There is a deeply embedded cultural assumption that responding to an insult is the dignified choice. That silence means you had nothing to say. That not defending yourself is the same as accepting the verdict. This assumption is wrong. And understanding why it is wrong will transform how you use silence, from a last resort into a first choice. When you respond to an insult, even brilliantly, even with perfect timing and devastating precision, you confirm one thing above all others. Their words had sufficient power to compel your reaction. You validated the tactic. You demonstrated that the mechanism works, and the person who delivered the insult received the only thing they were actually seeking: evidence that they reached you. But silence? Genuine, grounded, completely at ease silence that communicates something no comeback ever can. It communicates that this person does not have the standing to compel your response. that their words arrived and were assessed and found insufficient to disturb the interior they were aimed at. That you are so settled in your own sense of self that their attempt to unsettle it registered as something between irrelevant and mildly interesting. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of social power available in a conflict. The power of someone who cannot be baited. And consider the social mechanics from the other side. In any public confrontation, silence does not fall neutrally. It falls on whoever created the aggression. They said the hostile thing. They escalated. They created the tension. And your silence is a spotlight on that fact, a calm, unwavering, completely pressure-free spotlight that keeps their behavior visible without you having to point at it. The discomfort of that silence belongs entirely to them. Learn to sit in silence the way the most confident people in any room sit in stillness. Not performing calm, actually calm. Not suppressing a response, genuinely not requiring one. That quality is learnable. It is built in practice. And once built, it is one of the most powerful things you can carry into any difficult interaction. Way 6. Offer no surface and watch the energy. Return to sender. In physics, there is a principle that applies perfectly to the dynamics of emotional conflict. Energy directed at a surface that offers no resistance has nowhere to go. It cannot penetrate. It cannot bounce back as conflict. It simply dissipates, returning, ultimately, to its source. This is the strategic principle of offering no surface. When an insult arrives and you offer nothing, no visible hurt, no defensive posturing, no spike of energy that signals the landing was successful, the aggression has no place to land. And something fascinating happens in that absence. The hostility that was launched outward, finding no target, folds back on the person who launched it. They are now sitting with the full weight of what they said, in the absence of any response that would have distributed that weight between you. The practical expression of this principle is not performed indifference. That is a reaction too, just a quieter one, and most people can feel the difference. It is genuine non-investment. The practiced internal reality that this person's assessment of you carries no currency in the economy of your self-worth. That their words arrived, were observed, and produced nothing because there was nothing in you for them to activate. Calm, steady eye contact is the physical anchor of this state. Not a stare, not the aggressive, wide-eyed intensity of someone suppressing fury. A quiet, present, entirely untroubled gaze that communicates without language. I see you. I hear what you said. I am completely fine. The eyes do not widen with hurt. They do not narrow with contempt. They simply hold, with the particular quality that belongs to someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to defend. This is a buildable skill. It is built in the small moments, the minor provocations, the passing dismissals, where you practice offering nothing and observe how the energy finds nowhere to go. Each practice makes the next one slightly more natural. And the person who has genuinely mastered this, who has built the internal reality that makes the non-surface real rather than performed, is a person who has become, in the most practical sense, emotionally bulletproof. Way 7. Build your identity, where no one else can reach it. Here is the core vulnerability that every insult exploits, the one that makes emotional mastery impossible without addressing it directly. If your sense of self-worth is located anywhere outside of you, it can be reached from outside of you. This is the architecture problem that no technique, no reframe, no strategic silence can fully solve without being accompanied by the foundational work of relocating your self-worth to a place that is genuinely inaccessible to external attack. Most people, if they are completely honest, have built their self-concept from external materials. Praise, achievement, recognition, the validation of people they respect. These materials feel solid because they have been consistent enough to build on. But they share one catastrophic structural feature. The same hands that built them have access to them. The approval that created your sense of worth can be revoked. The recognition that made you feel real can be withdrawn. The opinions that you built your identity on can change, which means your emotional stability is perpetually one insult away from a structural threat. The Stoic solution is not to need less validation through discipline of desire, though that is part of it. It is to relocate the foundation of your self-image to materials that belong entirely to you and cannot be accessed from the outside. Your values, the principles you have consciously chosen and honestly examine whether you are living. Your commitments, the promises made to yourself and kept without audience. Your character, the quality of who you are in the moments that cost something, when no one is watching and the choice is genuinely hard. These materials are entirely yours. No insult can revise them. No dismissal can diminish them. No public slight can reach the place where they are stored, because they are stored in your own conscience, which is the one location no external force can enter without your explicit invitation. Boundaries, built from this foundation, carry a completely different quality. They are not reactive walls thrown up in self-defense. They are calm, clear, non-negotiable communications about what is and is not acceptable in your presence, delivered without heat, without apology, without requiring the other person's agreement to stand. They protect your peace not by fighting for it, but by simply requiring it as a matter of course, with the absolute assurance of someone who knows exactly what they are worth and is not available for negotiation on the subject. Build here. Build deeply, and watch how much harder it becomes for anything launched from the outside to find a target worth hitting. Way 8. Lock in your purpose. Until the noise becomes irrelevant. There is a level of focus available to human beings that does not merely reduce the impact of external insults. It renders them structurally unable to compete for attention in the first place. That level of focus is what happens when you are completely, genuinely, wholly locked into your purpose. Think about the people you most admire for their emotional resilience, not their ability to endure hardship grimly, but their genuine, visible lack of disturbance in the face of criticism, dismissal, or attack. The common feature is almost never superior emotional regulation techniques. It is superior clarity of mission. They know exactly what they are building, exactly why it matters, and exactly where their energy is required. And in the presence of that clarity, an insult, however sharp, however public, however deliberately crafted, simply cannot compete for the bandwidth it would need to produce lasting damage. This is the Stoic concept of telos, the end, the purpose, the direction toward which a life is organized. When the telos is clear and genuinely inhabited, everything that does not serve it becomes background, not through suppression, through simple irrelevance. The noise doesn't get filtered out because you are working hard to ignore it. It doesn't register because you are fully occupied with something that actually matters. Your purpose does not have to be world historical. It has to be real. It has to be yours. It has to be specific enough that you can wake up knowing exactly what today is for. A creative project, a business you are building, a skill you are developing, a family you are raising, a community you are serving. Something that, when you are fully in it, makes the opinion of someone who is not contributing to it genuinely, not performatively, irrelevant. Establish boundaries that protect the time and energy this purpose requires, not aggressively, clearly. With the calm authority of someone who has decided what their life is for and is no longer available for activities that work against it. That clarity, projected consistently, also changes how people engage with you. People who are looking for emotional reactions to exploit tend to find clearly purposed people unrewarding targets. The focused life is its own protection. Way 9. Choose permanently not to be offended. Everything in this video builds toward this. The single most powerful decision you can make about your emotional life. Decide once and finally that you are not available to be offended. Not because offensive things don't happen. They will keep happening, with reliable regularity, for the rest of your life. Not because you are above the initial sting. You are human, and the sting is a human response that no philosophy eliminates. But because you have decided, with complete clarity and genuine conviction, that the sustained state of offense, the prolonged experience of being wounded by what someone said, is a state you are no longer willing to inhabit. This decision is not suppression, it is sovereignty. There is an enormous difference between pushing down what you feel, which builds pressure and produces unpredictable releases, and making a fundamental decision about what you are willing to let take up residence in your emotional life. The psychological research on this is unambiguous. People who score high on the personality trait of offense proneness, the tendency to take things personally and sustain the emotional response, consistently show higher rates of anxiety, lower relationship satisfaction, reduced professional performance, and measurably poorer physical health outcomes. Being easily offended is not a sign of sensitivity or high standards. It is a sign of an underdeveloped boundary between the external world and the internal one. That boundary can be built. The decision to build it is the first brick. And once the decision is genuine, once it is lived rather than merely intended, something shifts at the structural level. The insult arrives, and the usual pathway to sustained injury simply isn't open. You feel the initial response. You observe it with the curiosity of someone who has been through this before, and you watch it pass cleanly, quickly, without residue. The way weather passes through an open sky. Make the decision, then make it again tomorrow, and the day after, until it stops being a decision and becomes simply the way you are built. Way 10. Protect your peace. Like the irreplaceable asset, it is the closing way is also the most ongoing one. Because mastering your emotions in the face of insult is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily practice, a commitment renewed every morning before the world has had a chance to test it. Your inner peace is not a permanent condition that, once achieved, maintains itself without effort. It is a choice, active, deliberate, made against the background of a world that will test it regularly, creatively, and without warning. And the people who maintain it consistently are not the ones who have found a way to avoid being tested. They are the ones who have built the daily practice of recommitting to their peace before the tests arrive. This means treating your emotional state as the asset it actually is. Your peace of mind is not a luxury. It is the operating system on which your entire life runs. Your relationships, your work, your health, your creativity, your capacity for joy. All of it is processed through the quality of your inner state. And every time you allow an insult to compromise that state without deliberate intervention, you are allowing degradation of the asset that makes everything else possible. Marcus Aurelius, governing an empire under conditions of genuine crisis, began every day with deliberate mental preparation. He reminded himself what the day would likely bring. He renewed his commitment to his values and his responses before circumstances demanded them. He chose his peace proactively, in the quiet, before anything had happened to threaten it. This practice, daily, brief, honest, is the difference between philosophy that is held intellectually and philosophy that is actually lived. Know every principle in this video. Agree with every insight. But without the daily renewal of the commitment to live by them, the next insult will find you unprepared, and the insult after that, and the one after that. Make the choice every morning. Before the first provocation, before the first test, before the first person reaches for something inside you that you have already decided is not available. Choose your peace. Explicitly. Deliberately. As the non-negotiable foundation of the day you are about to live. That daily choice, made consistently, becomes architecture. Architecture becomes character. Character becomes simply who you are. And the person who chooses their peace before the world asks for it, before the insult arrives, before the provocation lands, before the test begins, that person cannot be emotionally mastered by anyone, because they have already mastered themselves. 10 ways, 5 frameworks, one truth that runs underneath all of them like the deepest current in a river. Your emotional life is yours, completely, not determined by what people say to you, determined entirely by what you do with what they say. The insult you received was a self-portrait, not a verdict. The words were weightless until you weighed them. The silence you learned to hold was not weakness. It was the language of someone who cannot be reached. The self-image you are building on bedrock, in the location no one else can access, that is becoming, every day, harder to attack. And the purpose you are locked into, the real, specific, meaningful work of your life, is making the noise genuinely, structurally irrelevant. This is emotional mastery, not the absence of feeling, the presence of governance, the practiced, daily, philosophically grounded capacity to feel everything and be controlled by nothing. The next insult is coming. Maybe today, maybe this week, from someone who knows exactly where the buttons are, or from a stranger who stumbles onto them by accident. And when it arrives, you will be different. Not because the person has changed, because you have. You will pause where you used to react, observe where you used to absorb, choose where you used to respond automatically, and walk away with your peace intact, not because nothing was thrown at you, but because what was thrown at you found nothing to hold on to. If this gave you something real today, share it with someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 ways is going into your practice starting now. And subscribe, because this is the work, the deep, daily, unglamorous, life-changing work of emotional mastery. You are not what people say about you. You are what you do with what they say. Start building that today. See you in the next one.